Your last name feels like the most permanent thing about you. It was there before you could walk, before you could speak, stitched onto every document that will ever matter. Your birth certificate, your passport, your gravestone. You inherited it the way you inherited your eye color, and you've probably never once stopped to ask where it came from or why it exists at all. But here's the part that should bother you. For most of human history, nobody had one. People lived, worked, married, and died with a single name, and it was enough. So somewhere along the way, something changed. And it wasn't because people suddenly needed a better way to introduce themselves at parties. The real reason your family carries a second name has almost nothing to do with identity. It has to do with someone, somewhere, needing to find you. Think about how strange that actually is. A name is supposed to be the most personal thing you own. It's the word people use to mean you, specifically, as opposed to anyone else who has ever existed. And yet the second half of it, the part that probably gets passed down to your kids, wasn't invented for you. It wasn't even invented by your family. For most of the time, humans have walked around speaking language. First names did all the work. Small villages didn't need more than that. There was only one Mary, one Tom, one old John who lived by the well. Everybody already knew which one you meant. The need for a second identifier only shows up once a group of people gets too large, too mobile, or too entangled with something bigger than itself to keep track of informally. And that's the detail worth sitting with. Surnames aren't a personal evolution, they're a population scale problem. Something forced large numbers of strangers to suddenly need a more precise way to be sorted, counted, and located. That something wasn't love or family pride or tradition. It was an entirely different kind of institution learning to see its own people for the first time. In medieval Europe, most people got by just fine with one name, but as towns swelled into cities, and as kings began trying to govern territories larger than a single glance could take in, a problem emerged. There were now multiple Johns, multiple Marys, multiple Williams, all crowded into the same tax ledger with no way to tell them apart on paper. So a solution crept in, almost by accident at first. People started getting tagged with a second descriptor, not a name so much as a label. John, who works with iron, became John Smith. William, who lives by the brook, became William Brook. Robert, whose father was named John, became Robert Johnson. These weren't identities. They were directions, the medieval equivalent of a pin dropped on a map designed to help someone else find you in a crowd. The political scientist James C. Scott, who spent his career studying how governments learn to see the populations they rule, called this kind of development legibility. The process by which a messy, informal community gets translated into something a state apparatus can read, sort, and act on. Before legibility, you existed to your neighbors, your family, your local priest. After it, you existed to a tax roll, and surnames were one of the very first tools that made that possible. Once a name became fixed and inheritable instead of descriptive and situational, once Smith stopped meaning a Smith and started meaning this specific bloodline, a person could be tracked not just in one census, but across generations. It's a tidy story. Cities grew, record-keeping got harder, surnames solved it. Clean, practical, almost boring. Except that's not actually why most surnames spread the way, and when they did, the real driver wasn't civic convenience at all. It was something far less neighborly. Surnames didn't spread because families wanted them. They spread because governments demanded them and used force to make sure people complied. In medieval England, fixed surnames took hold largely thanks to escalating tax censuses. If you couldn't be matched to last year's record, you could be taxed twice, accused of dodging payment, or treated as a stranger with no legal standing in your own town. Having a stable, inheritable surname wasn't a convenience. It was protection from being misidentified by the people who had the power to fine you, conscript you, or seize your land. The starkest version of this happened centuries later, far more deliberately. When Napoleon's administration swept across Europe in the early 1800s, one of its quiet but enormous reforms was mandating that entire populations, including Jewish communities who had until then often used patronymics or no fixed family name at all, adopt permanent, registered surnames. The justification was bureaucratic efficiency. A modern state needed citizens who could be tracked from birth to death across one unified system, but the real function was control. A government cannot tax, draft, surveil, or punish a population it cannot consistently identify. The fixed surname turned a fluid, locally known person into a stable unit a distant authority could locate on paper, forever. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The thing you think of as your family's identity was, in countless cases, not chosen by your ancestors at all. It was assigned, recorded, and enforced, sometimes overnight, sometimes by a clerk with a quota to fill. Your bloodline's permanent name might be nothing more than the last administrative decision a government ever made about your family, which raises an uncomfortable question about what else, in your own life, you've mistaken for a personal identity, when really it was just paperwork. You probably think your relationship to being tracked started with the internet, with cookies, with targeted ads, with some algorithm somewhere quietly building a profile of you. But you've been living inside this exact arrangement your entire life, and the surname was only the first version of it. Look at everything else you carry that exists purely so a larger system can locate you. Your social security number, your account logins, your phone number, the unique ID tied to your passport. None of these were created so you could express who you are. They exist so that a bank, a government, a platform, something bigger than you with no personal stake in you, can sort you instantly out of millions of other people and act on you accordingly. The uncomfortable truth is that legibility never stopped at the medieval tax rolls. It just got quieter and more thorough. Where a 13th century clerk needed a surname to know which John owed taxes, a modern system needs a username, a cookie, a device ID, a credit score, fragments of you stitched together so an institution that has never met you can still recognize you instantly. You sign up for a new app and it asks for your full name, almost reflexively, the same way a census taker once did. You don't think twice about it because by now, being trackable feels less like a transaction and more like simply existing. That's the real inheritance hiding inside your last name. Not heritage, not lineage, a precedent, proof that the moment you become legible to a system, you stop being just a person and start being a record. And once that precedent gets set, it never really goes away. It only finds new paperwork to live in. So the next time someone asks for your full name at a doctor's office, on a form, in a drop-down menu, notice what's actually happening. You're not introducing yourself. You're being filed. The name that feels like the deepest expression of who you are was, at its origin, just a government's way of making sure it never lost track of you. And in a strange way, it worked exactly as designed. You've carried that record faithfully for your entire life, and so will your children, and so will theirs. If you liked noticing the strange machinery hiding behind something this ordinary, that's basically the whole channel. Every video here takes one thing you've never questioned and shows you the hidden system running underneath it. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing the world that way.